Thinking about installing a rainwater tank, but you're stuck on one big question: do you install an underground tank or do you keep it above ground? The wrong choice can cost you more than you can expect in terms of money, time, and space. So in this video, I'm going to break down the real pros and cons between the two solutions to make sure you choose the best solution for your home. If you're completely new to rainwater harvesting, don't worry, you're not alone. More UK homeowners and self-builders are installing water tanks for their properties to help cut down on water bills, stay resilient during hosepipe bans, and reduce their reliance on mains water. But choosing between an above ground and an underground tank isn't always straightforward. Let's run through both options to see which one suits you best. So what is rainwater harvesting? At its simplest, it's all about capturing the rainwater that falls onto your rooftop, storing it into a tank, and then reusing it back in your property for things like feeding the washing machine, flushing the toilets, and watering the garden. So let's start with the simplest option. Above ground tanks sit on the surface, typically in your garden, beside the house, or even connected to the downpipe. Most people start with these as they're quite simple in the form of a water butt, but they can scale up to much larger tanks too. There are many advantages to having an above ground tank. The first one is cost and simplicity. Above ground tanks tend to be the cheaper option as there's no excavation required, no heavy machinery, and in most cases they're a simple DIY job. They're also easy to maintain because everything is visible. That means you can easily spot any leaks and cracks in the tank. Plus, when it comes out to flushing the filters or cleaning out any debris, it's much easier because everything is above ground. Above ground tanks are much more flexible as well, as you can move it around, you can link multiple tanks together, and if you decide to move home, you can take it with you, which is something you can't do with an underground tank. They're great for garden use, especially during hosepipe bans, as the rainwater is fair game because it's been collected and not from a main water supply. Most above ground tanks work on gravity alone, so you can easily fill up your watering cans or connect a hosepipe without needing a pump. And finally, there's a range of sizes and styles to suit you, from slimline tanks for your garden to all the way up to much bigger vertical ones for bigger plots. However, they're not perfect. One big disadvantage of an above ground tank is weather exposure. All year round, they're always exposed to the elements. That means in the winter, it's exposed to frost, the water can freeze and can expand and crack the plastic. And in the summer, it can be exposed to heat, which could cause bacterial growth inside the tank if the water becomes stagnant and isn't used. Another issue is they're always exposed to UV rays. This means that the material can degrade over time, so the tank may eventually need replacing. Plus, debris can build up a lot faster, so it needs to be maintained more often. Aesthetics and space is another big one as well, as let's face it, a big plastic tank might not be the best garden feature, so they often need screening to hide them away. They're also more vulnerable, as being above ground, it means they're more susceptible to accidental knocks, storm damage, and vandalisms in some areas. And pressure is limited as gravity only gets you so far. If you want to use the rainwater back into the home for flushing your toilets, feeding the washing machine, or an irrigation system in the garden, you'll likely need a pump. So that's above ground. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum. Underground tanks are those buried beneath the surface, typically under patios, driveways, and gardens, and pump water directly to where it's needed. These systems are typically used when rainwater is used back inside the property. So what are the benefits of having an underground tank rather than an above ground tank? Well, the first one is space. With an underground tank, as it's buried underneath the surface, you don't have to worry about compromising on space in your garden or the overall look of your garden. The next benefit is water stability. With having the tank buried underground, the surrounding soil naturally insulates the tank. This means it stops the water from freezing in the winter, overheating during the summer, and prevents algae from growing inside the tank. They're also well protected, as there's no risk of storm damage, the tank being knocked over or tampered with as it's buried underground. Underground tanks tend to hold a greater volume of water as well, as you don't have to compromise on space, making them perfect for household use, which means that up to 50% of your mains water usage can be substituted with rainwater. They also work all year round. Unlike above ground tanks, you don't have the risk of them freezing over, and they integrate seamlessly with household plumbing, which means you have a continuous supply of water all year round, and most of them come with an automatic mains water backup. Of course, there are trade-offs with an underground tank, as they tend to be more expensive. Maybe not necessarily the initial investment, but certainly the installation of them, as excavation, groundwork, and backfilling can all add up. They're usually not a DIY job either, as with incorrect installation, it can mean floating tanks or pipework failures, so it's worth having a professional install the tank for you. Whilst maintenance is less frequent, it can be harder than an above ground tank. As with the other ground tank, if something is to go wrong and you need to access via the manhole, it can make things a bit more difficult than accessing an above ground tank. Ground conditions matter as well, as with high water tables, clay soil, and rocky ground conditions could make the tank unsuitable to install, or more expensive. Another issue with underground tanks is they're pretty much permanent. Any upsizing or relocating means more digging. And there's the additional cost of having a pump with your tank, as all underground tanks require some form of a powered pump in order to move the water to where it's needed, which can be a small ongoing energy cost. So when you're choosing between an above ground tank or an underground tank, there's no one size fits all answer. An above ground tank is a great low cost starting point and is ideal for small watering purposes like watering the garden. But an underground tank is perfect if you want to use the rainwater for much more. This includes flushing toilets, washing machine and any other outdoor uses all year round. Whichever route you choose, the most important thing is getting the right size tank for you. As if you choose a tank that's too small, you could be constantly running out of water. Or if you buy a tank that's too big, you could be paying for capacity you don't actually need. That's why we put together our rainwater harvesting tank size calculator. It takes into account your local rainfall data, your roof area, and what you want to use the rainwater for to recommend the perfect tank size for your property. It's completely free to use, so if you're in the early planning stages of your project, head there now to find out the right tank size for you. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you do have any questions regarding either underground or above ground tanks, make sure to leave them in the comments section below.